A warm welcome to another edition of the Magpie Circle live YouTube and Twitter show tonight. And we've got a debutante, a new name on the team sheet, international clearance received from BBC Towers in the centre of Nottingham earlier today. A very, very warm welcome, Charlie Slater.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
I know, delighted you can join us. As we've been talking about just before we went on air, you may have been banned by Torquay. You are always most welcome here. Always most welcome, of course, Beth Curzon, our resident Ladies Notts County expert. Beth, good to see you again.
Nice to be on again. Thank you for having me.
Good. And you're just going to put in the first half tonight because you've got one or two other engagements to attend. So thank you for that. On the show tonight, okay, 5 or 6 key things we want to discuss. Clearly, review your thoughts on the performance at Torquay on Saturday. I want to focus on the playoff race and assess that. As I see it, it's 3 clubs, 3 places with 6 clubs up for grabs. 3 from Halifax, Bromley, Wrexham, Chesterfield, Notts and Eastleigh. Current form. We know that at the club, stats and data is key. And I don't want to be negative tonight because I thought we played very well and we were very unfortunate on Saturday. However, here's a stat for you. Our results in the last 5 games is the worst of any club in the top 16 of the National League in current form. So we clearly need to get that sorted. Notts' approach to the playoffs. Don O'Riordan and I had a few thoughts on whether Notts were almost ignoring the playoff race publicly. Certainly seems to change around. Connell Rawlinson came out on all guns blazing the following day. And the BBC, Charlie, get an invite to go and watch training on the Thursday. Great.
I know.
Let's have more of it. Let's have more of it. Eastleigh away, we'll be looking ahead to that one. We kind of started them off on their run, didn't they? Beat us. Won on Saturday, great result for them. Big one, I think, tomorrow. And we're going to be missing 1 or 2 players as well, by the sounds of it, from today's press conference and social media. Blackout next weekend. And I think that it is very well done by the footballing authorities. I've worked with the PFA in the past. I know they've been one of the leading lights behind this. And good to see Notts made a statement. I think it was yesterday, confirming that they will be part of that ban from social media over the weekend. Something I know that, Beth, we've discussed in previous shows. Right, long enough preamble from me. Sadly, because they wouldn't let you in, Charlie, you were watching it on the stream like the rest of us. Much improved performance. What's your take? 1 gained, 2 lost?
Yeah, no, I think they lost 2 points there, to be honest with you. Whenever you're 2-0 up and you're approaching the last 15 minutes of the game, you expect you at least at the very least hope to take all 3 points away from it, and to not do, particularly the run of late and some disappointing performances was difficult to take, difficult to accept, and the nature of how they conceded the goals again, set pieces, long balls into the box, not clearing their lines effectively. That has become a real Achilles heel of theirs. And I know you were throwing some stats out there just a moment ago, Macy, but I was doing my research ahead of the game tomorrow at Eastleigh, and I was looking at goals like that, and they've conceded 1/3 of their goals, Notts have, all season. So this is not a new phenomenon. After the 75th minute, including 4 of their last 7 that they've conceded. They've all been after the 75th minute, with 2 of the remaining 2 of that 7 have both come late in the first half. So 6 of the 7 have all come late in either half. And all 7 of their last 7 goals conceded have been either long balls into the box or set pieces. And that's got to improve. That's got to improve. Ian Burchnall knows that. When I spoke to him after the game, when I had to do it on the interview on the street outside, play more after the game. He knows that. He knows that. He's well aware of how Notts concede goals, and the word is out against Notts. Other managers will have picked up on that as well. If you press them high with energy and can force them into errors when they're in possession, and then win the ball back and just get long throws, set pieces, launch balls into the penalty area, eventually, at least it feels that way at the moment, eventually you'll get some joy against Notts. A crack will appear. And that's how we've seen them concede goals of late. So that's disappointing. Disappointing the way and the manner of which they conceded the goals. But that is not to overlook the fact that, as you said, this was a much improved performance. They were so much better than they have been. I thought they were really composed at times. They mixed it up. They didn't pass for the sake of passing, which they have been guilty of doing sometimes. But I think there's a false, and I am rambling, so forgive me. There's a false sort of, I don't know, sense of appreciation for 15 passes in a row on the halfway line when they're going side to side and the opponents are just letting you do it. That's passing for passing's sake. And I understand sometimes you need a pattern and a spell of possession, but don't pass for the sake of passing. And they didn't do that against Torquay. They mixed it up. They went long when they could go long. They were short when they could go short. And it massively helped having Michael Doyle there, sitting in that kind of quarterback role again, being able to pivot things around and get the teammates involved, because obviously he's very comfortable doing that. But I thought Jake Reeves looked much more comfortable playing 10 yards further up the pitch, and Jim O'Brien looked better as a result of it as well. So I just thought it was an all-around improved performance. And let's not kid ourselves, we'd have all bitten your hand off for a point before the game. The fact that they were 2-0 up, though, with 15 minutes to go, does make it a little bit more difficult to accept. And so with all of that said, to wheel back around to your original question, yes, in the end, I think it will go down as 2 points dropped.
Very good, very forthright, Charlie. We like that.
I've been waiting to get on the show for a while. I've got loads to say.
Hey, independence. You do a very good job on the show. You can't comment, but I would say you are much more objective than some of your colleagues that cover other football clubs. Let's leave it at that. Beth, now then, we were exchanging notes beforehand. Have to say, and this is anecdotally, awful lot of people I know have stopped buying the streams. And clearly, one of the reasons they stopped buying the stream on Saturday was because they wouldn't let Charlie in. But you bought it like I did. What was your take from it?
I agree with everything Charlie said, to be honest. We looked so much more comfortable on the ball. Players at the back weren't booting it under pressure. We were playing out properly when we needed to. I agree about Doyle. Having him back has been a massive bonus. It freed up Reeves to do his job rather than have to pick up Doyle's as well, which he's not so good at as Doyle is. It's always a struggle. It was so good being 2-0 up, and it was I think it's the best 45 minutes we've seen for a very long time, and I think it shows that the point that we've always made for the past 2 weeks, we definitely have the my internet cut out there. I think we definitely have the ability in the squad to still make it. You can see it in the likes of Rawlinson and Doyle. But, we've got it, and I think as it approaches the final third, is always that those nerves, because we do concede then quite a lot. And but the good news is the mistakes that can be rectified. Set pieces and conceding, things like that are things you can work on, and we clearly are doing. And I have to say our set pieces looked a lot better than they have been in recent weeks as well. We've often either hit the first man or they've been floated in, and people like Wootton haven't been able to get a strong enough header on them. So we're clearly doing lots of training ground drills, and it's easy to see what we are working on. And yeah, it's a big positive that hopefully we can take into the coming game. So it's definitely doable.
Thank you, Beth. Yeah, great stats earlier, better than mine, Charlie. One thing concerns me a little bit is this whole discussion and debate around set pieces. And I'm sure it doesn't mean to come across this way, but sometimes when you listen to how Ian addresses concession of goals from set pieces, it's almost like they're not as important. Where a phrase has been used, in open play, we kept them out. Yeah. But we let 2 in, or we let 1 in, or whatever, from set pieces. And set pieces should be the easiest thing to defend against. If I'm talking to Neil Warnock, I'm talking to Sam Allardyce, I'm talking to Gareth Southgate, England semi-finals of the World Cup, I'm not sure they necessarily buy into those sentiments. I suspect Ian doesn't mean it in the way it comes across, but it's almost like it's not as important, when the reality is, particularly at National League level, they're absolutely crucial, aren't they? Absolutely crucial.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Look, the higher up the leagues you go, generally speaking, and of course I'm speaking generally here, the ability is obviously better, and so the majority of goals, or at least a much greater percentage of goals, are scored by acts of brilliance, brilliant moments of team play, great understanding, fast-moving football that cuts through a defence. I'm talking brilliance is what gets you your goals in the top level of the game. And the lower down the leagues you go, it feels like that percentage goes down, and up starts to creep the percentage of goals that are scored from either human error or worldies, because it's a pot shot from 30, 35 yards, or goals from a set piece. And I agree with you. I don't think Ian means it in a disparaging way. But what I do think is Ian is the type of coach, and particularly where he is coached, where, whether you like it or not, in Scandinavia at the level that he's coached, for all I know about it, chances are the tactical ability will be higher than in the National League. However, the grit of the game will be much grainier in the National League than in Scandinavia. And so, yeah, it is going to, he has a greater appreciation for goals that are scored from open play. That is for sure. He has a greater appreciation for that. But, you know, the National League and football doesn't respect how you get your goals. It just respects your goals, whether you get them or whether you concede them. And Notts have got to get a grip of conceding goals from set pieces and conceding, you know, goals from long balls into their penalty area, because I think the majority of teams, the lower down the leagues you go, play the percentages, and those percentages being play the game as close to the opponent's penalty area as you possibly can, because chances are at some point someone's going to make a mistake, and you'll then be in a position to possibly capitalize. And also, by the very nature of playing the game as far away from your penalty area as you can, is that when one of you makes a mistake, you're a bloody long way away from your own penalty area and are much less likely to get punished for it. So these are all nuances of the game. The game's the same, 22 men, bag of wind, big pitch, kick it about. But the nuances within the differences between the leagues and the way the game is played are all things that Ian Burchnall will know and will be learning about the National League as the weeks go by, as well as getting to know the players. Let's not forget that. He's getting to know these players. Some of them he'll have never heard of, including the opposition's players as well.
Beth, you played abroad, you played in Bulgaria up until around about the Christmas time. Set pieces, are they, is there the same amount of focus and attention on them, defending and scoring from, continentally? Is that something you did or didn't notice in Bulgaria?
We actually conceded most of our goals through set pieces, so we actually worked quite hard on defending those. So it's definitely something I've noticed, but it just hardly depends on team to team as well. I think if teams are very good solidly in defence, it's not something you end up having to work on as much because they're not conceding that way. But from my experience going abroad, it was something we did work on more so towards the end of the time I was there, once we realised actually that's where we're conceding. But it is like Charlie said, it's really important when it doesn't matter how well you're playing. If you 2-0 up, if you've conceded 2 or 3 set pieces, it doesn't matter. You know, the game doesn't respect how well you've played. You just got to keep them out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see us turning around this form until we sort set pieces out at both ends.
Yeah.
If I'm honest with you. Just because they are defining moments.
It just feels like they've got to score. Sorry, it feels like they've got to score at least 2 in every game to win it at the moment, because they've conceded 2 or more in each of their last 6 away games. So you've got to score at least 2.
We're getting some observations coming in. Wayne Wilkins says, "Evening, chaps," and then there's a little Spanish flag, and the meaning for that, Charlie, in case you're wondering, is because he's in Barcelona, so he likes to remind us most weeks that he's listening in from Barcelona.
Okay. Visca Barça, Visca Catalunya.
Kelsdyke says, "I can't believe we didn't bring Enzio on for the last 15 minutes to give the Torquay 10 men something to worry about. Need to use Rodriguez and Enzio to attack, not sit back and the usual concede." Alan Cotty, "I didn't buy the stream on principle. Wished I had when 2-0 up. I suspect a lot of people did. But when 2-1 with minutes left, even though against 10, I knew we'd concede. Is it purely psychological, and how can they stop it?" I've got one from Bakersfield Pie here. I grew up in Bakersfield, a little small suburb at the top of Snetton, adjoining Collick Woods. I must know the guy. Do you think that under Neil Ardley we would have got 1 point out of a possible 12? Derek Flowers just trying to play like Barcelona work in this league. You have to play ugly at times. I think, to be fair, Derek Knotts did mix it up, as Charlie's mentioned earlier on Saturday. Paul Smith, how important does Charlie feel Kyle Wootton is to the team in terms of defending set pieces, and can he ever see Knotts having a more exciting front line without Wootton? SK, Charlie, you must know what's happening with Sam and Ruben. How are they rotating the bench? Now, I think in terms of Sam and Ruben, that was addressed at the presser today. And I think kind of the olive branch or whatever you want to call it has been put out from the manager, saying that those guys have worked harder in training. Let's take a look at the playoff race. No, we won't. I'll tell you what. A bit of good news from you being banned, Charlie. Yeah, because I had a bit of fun on social media. Lots of people rallied round to the cause. Quite a few by the stream on principle. And it's not just fans, but other clubs have been in touch with you as well. And a little bit of light at the end of the rainbow from all us Notts fans wanting to hear your commentary on the stream between now and the end of the season, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it was a rarity that, I mean, like I put on Twitter, it's the first time in like 10 years I've ever been refused accreditation to a ground. And do bear in mind, there is a contractual agreement between the BBC and the National League to allow BBC reporters into the game. But I think Torquay believed that they honoured that contract by allowing one reporter in from BBC Radio Devon and thus ticking that box. I've not been privy to actually seeing the contract, so I don't know whether it's stated that means just one or more than. But yes, I've had Wrexham in touch and Barnet and Altrincham today, and they've all said you'll have no problems with us, and I'll be in there like swimwear when it comes to those dates, whenever they are. So it's commentating off of the stream is not a lot of fun. The only saving grace was that we didn't get stuck on the M5 on the way down and spend 10 hours on the road on Saturday. And we also had a Nando's before the game. So that was the only saving grace, because otherwise commentating on a stream is horrendous. And I mean, Torquay's was one camera pivoting back and forth, which is, it wasn't the best, as you know, if you bought it. But it was still better than some of the streams that we had to commentate off of through the months of January, February and March when the BBC had these travel restrictions in place, because by the end of some of those, it felt like I had motion sickness. So, yeah, if I never have to commentate off of another stream again, that will be fine by me.
Yeah, it did make me smile a little bit because there was a debate about whether Knotts' goal had crossed the line. Sorry, the Torquay second had crossed the line. And we're all watching off one camera, right? And there's all this debate on social media. The ball definitely wasn't over the line. I promise you, from that camera, you have no idea, right?
That's not a clue.
Independent and fair.
I didn't know he'd scored
it. We've been cheated. We've been robbed. And that was the same linesman that flagged for the second yellow for the sending off. So whatever you say about him, he clearly was not either one way nor the other.
I also loved, I saw on Twitter afterwards, Mark Ellis, someone had tweeted him and was like, I thought you were a disgrace today, play acting and all that sort of stuff. He was like, yeah, cheers, mate. I'm actually sat in Torquay A&E right now getting stitches in the head with a broken nose or whatever. So, yeah, no play acting there. He's not the type, trust me.
Yeah. Do you know if the team bus had to wait for him, or did they get like a car to bring him back?
He's from down there. So I think he may have seen some family. I mean, as much as you can do, he probably had a hotel booked for the night or something like that, because obviously you can't stay with family at the minute. So I imagine he had a hotel booked anyway, as a happy coincidence. And I guess they had Sunday off and would have travelled back late on Sunday. So I believe the team bus left, and he will have come back at his own leisure.
Hey, you are a public figure, Charlie. So wherever you go, fans will spot you. So someone there is saying pre-match Nando's in the studio, or a pre-match KFC away at Fyle. So I'm guessing you and Stells probably had most of the bargain bucket, I'm guessing, and you just had the vegetable salad or whatever.
He's got those elbows like that, like those old strikers, those elbows that go up and pin you, that sort of thing. So you get nowhere near them. Well, the KFC at Fyle, that was because we went 3 times and had 3 KFCs and watched only 1 football match. So, yeah, that was fun.
Oh dear!
At least we won.
Yeah. Beth, let's just look at this playoff race. So as I would see it, you've got by and large Torquay, Hartlepool, Sutton going for the 1 top spot. Possibly Stockport could still gatecrash that. They're 5 points off Torquay. Then from 5th down to 10th, there are 3 points separating Halifax, Bromley, Wrexham, Chesterfield. Ourselves, we've got 1 or 2 games in hand on most of those, and Eastleigh. Now, clearly tomorrow, if Eastleigh win, they will go above us. So you're looking at 6 teams, and you're looking at 3 places. Is it too much to ask for us to be in the top half of that 6-team table as it stands?
I don't think it's too much to ask. I think, as I said before, the game just gone proved to us for at least 45, if not 75 minutes, that we can play against the top team and silence them. When I was watching, the commentators couldn't actually find anything brilliant to say about their players. No one particularly stood out. We were closing them down well, which we've not been doing, before, blocking things quicker. It's going to be a tough ask, as has the last few weeks been, all season has been. And obviously there's a few teams on some good runs, and taking into account our record recently, I think it's harder considering the games we have had in hand we haven't won. But at the end of the day, we've got to accept what's happened, and we just have to bank on the fact and the positivity and the way that we played, and take the positivity into the next few games, and hopefully we can build a run ourselves, because it's definitely doable with the team we have. And like you mentioned as well, the positivity that's radiated from the top of the club in terms of the Connell's interview, Ian spoken. It seems the club seems to be in a much more positive place the last week following that, and it's similar to what we said on the podcast last week. Once fans see that, players see that, the atmosphere online, on social media, on the pitch seems much better. So I think we're definitely in a much better position this week than last week to go forward into the game, and hopefully take those positives that, surely, it's an away game, they're on the road, they're staying together overnight, that kind of thing. The players, it's camaraderie. Hopefully we're just building on things and we can get that all going again, hopefully some more wins.
And just to another one specifically on Notts County ladies, Joe Johnson says, I see Notts ladies were 2-0 up at half time on Sunday and lost 3-2. What does Beth make of that?
I did see I saw the updates. Obviously I still follow them on Twitter, and lots of my old, obviously I played with them all, so I love them all still, so I do follow what they're up to. And I saw a post-match interview, and one of the players, one of my friends, said, I think at half-time they thought the game was pretty closed off. I think they played really well. And again, I think from what the interviews, post-match interviews looked like, obviously I didn't see the game, I was playing myself. It appeared to be a mental thing. And like I said before, that's at least 80-90% of football is all in your head, mental and positivity and confidence on the ball. So another tough one to take, but hopefully they do better this Sunday.
Charlie, I thought it was quite remarkable up until last Tuesday how playoffs was a word that seemed not to be mentioned. You would not necessarily have realised we were actually in playoff contention, and it was massively downplayed, and this has featured on our podcast for several weeks. Then there seemed to be a huge sea change the following morning. You and Lee, mix, mingle, meet, manager, players, and although you personally didn't go down, a member from the BBC was invited on Thursday. Did you see much of that change yourself? And as a professional, what's been your take of Notts' kind of approach to the playoffs over the past 2-3 weeks, at least publicly?
I think there has been a change in the sense, because playoffs was always the minimum. acceptable kind of thing all season long. If you remember early on in the season, I remember Neil Ardley saying, no excuses, promotion is the goal this season. And I heard a few players come out with the almost word for word, verbatim, same sort of phrase. Can be no excuses this season. Blah, 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 blah. Of course, then, not excuses, but reasons do crop up, like loads of disruption to matches, like, due to COVID. But the minimum expectation was, well, everybody expected, right, this season's promotion. And then as the season's panned out, it's kind of got you. We've never been that team that's been able to string a real run together. And so then the minimum expectation was like, well, we'll do what we did last season and we'll be kind of, second or third, guarantee a home semi-final, and we'll go from there. And then as we dropped into kind of the middle of that playoff pack, people have started to look over their shoulder a little bit and started to go, ooh, it's not the guarantee that perhaps we once thought it was. And then the next thing you know, as of a week ago or however long it is now, it was they dropped out of the playoffs for the first time since January. And so I think all of that has massively changed the opinion about the playoffs, because you've gone from thinking that we'll get promoted automatic to we'll be fine, we'll have a home semi-final, to, well, it's all right, we'll get a home quarterfinal, to, oh God, I hope we make the playoffs. And, because, and just looking at the league table is the reason why opinions, I think, have changed about the playoffs, and the reasons why, I never noticed that they weren't being mentioned, but maybe that's just because they weren't being mentioned because so many people saw them as a given, and now they're not. So maybe that's why they're being mentioned more.
Beth, before you get away, three teams, and SB has just sent us an interesting one, which has been debated, I noticed, on telly. Stockport have just announced they're recording one of their players, Bennett, from Hartlepool. It was a very bizarre loan at the best of times. I think that's kind of an admission that Stockport think that they can catch Hartlepool for top spot. Halifax, Bromley, Wrexham, Chesterfield, Notts and Eastleigh. Don't want to put you on the spot, but we might as well just before you go. So which of those three are going to make the playoffs? Halifax, Bromley, Wrexham, Chesterfield, Notts and Eastleigh. And we'll hold you to this, obviously, in a few weeks' time.
I think I've thought about three in my head. I think Eastleigh have a decent chance if they play well and beat us tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think, but there's teams like Chester. I don't know. You have put me on the spot. Of
course we are. It's what it's about. Punditry.
I don't know. It just depends.
You could be amassed and be reminded of them by the masses.
I don't have an answer, Paul, and I'm going to have to think about it and get back to you.
Okay.
I think it depends.
I'm not going to make the playoffs.
Yes. I do.
That was the bailout question, wasn't it?
I do believe it. I think it's going to help us massively to get a goal in the first half. To be honest, I think that we need that, and like Charlie says, I think with the lack of confidence we appear to have with set pieces and conceding them, hopefully we can get more than one or two or three. So at least the goals that the opposition are chasing are higher, so it kind of minimises that risk of conceding through. But presumably that they've been working hard on defending those kind of things. He's clearly very aware of it. So
you stay as long as you want, Beth. Equally, feel free to disappear because I know you've got other engagements this evening. Paul Smith says, "Hey Beth, just say Chesterfield, Notts." Right. Second question now to Charlie. When we're looking at these teams, Halifax, Bromley, Wrexham, Chesterfield, Notts and Eastleigh, who do you reckon?
Eastleigh's running, if you're looking at it, is one of the easier run-ins. I mean, they've got us tomorrow, and then they've got to go to Torquay.
One of the easier run-ins, and they've got
us. No. Hang on. They've got us tomorrow, and then they've got to go to Torquay. That's what I'm saying. But then after that, it's a lot easier. They've got Barnet, they've got Altrincham, Aldershot, Boreham Wood, Solihull. A lot of teams there that aren't playing for anything, really. And I mean, crikey, Barnet have, I would say, being on the beach, but it's far worse than that. And there's no beach they can get to. So You know, I look at their running, and the reason I'm looking down at the moment is because I've got all the runnings of all the different teams up now.
You've got Eastleigh as one of the three, yeah?
No. See, I say all that to say I don't know. Chesterfield's running.
Well, Chesterfield have been on a fantastic run.
Chesterfield
with 2 defeats, but have clearly spent in the transfer market right up to deadline.
I think Knowles and Chesterfield are 2 of the 3.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would go Knowles and Chesterfield. I've made my mind up on the 3rd, but keep going on yours. So we're agreed on Knowles and Chesterfield.
I dare say Halifax. And I also think it's probably worth looking at who the teams have last day of the season, because I think no matter what, I don't think 3 teams are good enough to just pull away. So with that said, I think it's going to come down to the end, and I think it'll come down to the final game of the season. And so it's, I think, worth looking at who do those teams have, on the last day of the season. And obviously, Notts and Bromley have each other. Without getting my little list up again to see who the others have off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. But Chesterfield have got Halifax. So that's interesting. So you've got 4 of that 6 there playing each other. So I think it's going to come down to the last day. I think it'll be Halifax, Chesterfield, and Notts who will make the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm going with Notts, Chesterfield, and Wrexham. I just think league clubs, and if you look at the table, the league clubs are gravitating towards the leading positions now. And I think that might just give them a bit of an edge. And obviously, Bromley are going to get done twice by us, so that don't leave them too much room for manoeuvre. So there you are. There's other predictions. Feel free, by the way, on the chat board. Don't just have a go at us. Chuck your 3 in as well, and we'll see who gets all 3 right. Alan Cotty, he's an optimist. Hope I'm wrong, but I can't see us making the playoffs now. There will have to be big improvement if it's going to happen on current form. No chance. Derek Flowers mentions player recruitment. We'll come on to that in a bit, Charlie. Paul Smith reiterates your point. Halifax, Chesterfield, last match of season. Northants Pies, another optimist. Wrexham, Chesterfield, and Halifax. Right.
I'm just going to head off now, so I'll say bye to you now. See you soon. Thanks for having me on again.
Current form, Charlie. Yeah, I was surprised when I had a look at this, and I don't do this to, make things difficult. We will always be independent, and we will always be objective. And I genuinely felt sorry for the management team, all of the players on Saturday, because I thought they played very well. I did buy the stream, I watched it, and for 70 minutes, I thought we were excellent. I thought that even after we went 2-1, they didn't really have that many chances after that, And I thought, hey, we're actually playing this out quite well. Mark Ellis was clearly having a blinder. The Magpie Circle sponsored Mark Ellis. Yeah, we got that from the club today. Just thought I'd get that in. Because you went to school with him, didn't you, or college or whatever?
Yeah, no, we played for the same football team, yeah.
Yes, right, my apologies. I thought he was outstanding. They're down to 10 men. We really, really, really should see it out. We really should see that out. My concern here is that the huge amount of good work done on Saturday could potentially evaporate were we to lose. I don't want to be negative. We lose tomorrow, we go down to 10th, we lose twice to one of our main playoff rivals, who were hardly a playoff rival 2 weeks ago, as long as we don't lose to them at home. And I think all the goodwill that was created for 70 minutes at Torquay in a great performance, it will disappear. I promise you. Knowing fans, it will disappear. And, the criticism will come flooding back. So I think tomorrow is every game's important, I know, but I think there's quite a lot riding on it. So in a roundabout way, you give long answers, I give long questions.
Match made in heaven.
Our record, current form over 5 games, is the worst of every club in the top 16. Now, clearly, that coincides with Ian's arrival. There are some people out there that still say it's Neil Ardley's fault. Yeah. my personal view is accountability and responsibility takes place from day one. Be you a football manager, running Nando's, running KFC, whatever it is. How big a challenge do you think it is to have this very poor run and to have to finish in the playoffs?
It's a massive challenge.
In the eyes of the fans.
It is, in the eyes of the fans. It's almost like he's onto a really tough situation. And that's not Ian Burchnall's fault. I'd still look at the timing of the decision to change the manager. The fact that the manager has been changed is now, that's they made the decision, and Ian Burchnall, I believe, needs to be given the backing of fans, of the club, and he needs to be given this summer, and he needs to be given an opportunity to try and bring some of his own players in. So that's kind of by the by in a way, but it feels like he's been. I agree with Lee Curtis in a way, and I think he said it on here, that the timing didn't help, because he's been given a situation where the form wasn't great, but it also wasn't bad. They are told that they have to finish in the playoffs. That's the expectations of the fans. You've got to finish in the playoffs, and anything less than that is then considered a failure. And although I'm not sure that's then fair on Ian Burchnall, that is the reality. And my concern would be that could do some damage that may be considered by some irreparable. Like Neil Ardley being the man at the helm when Notts County were relegated for the first time out of the Football League. Some fans never forgave him for that. Like, never forgave him. If they went on a good run, they had to go quiet for a few weeks. But the moment things turned again, straight back out with Ardley out. And I do believe some fans were never won back. And my fear would be, if Notts were to miss out on the playoffs, the same could be said for Ian Burchnall. I'm not sure that's fair, but that's football. And that is, and expectations are high because of the football club, because of the money spent as well. Some players in the team are on really good money for the level. And so I think timing wise of the appointment and the managerial change didn't help anybody. And it didn't help Ian Burchnall out. But that being said, he's in charge now, and he needs to be backed. He needs to be given an opportunity, and he needs to somehow figure out how to stop the slide at the moment and get back on winning ways. We've always known confidence is a fragile thing in this Notts team. And I agree with you in the point that you were making when you were asking the question. It could evaporate amongst the fans, but you worry that confidence can then become an issue again, when what they should be able to do is take the positives out of that 70 minutes against Torquay, and ultimately the result, which, as I say, you'd have bit your hand off for before the game, and try and build on it. Because otherwise, if you just focus on the late concessions of goals and 2 points dropped, and then you go to a really important game against Eastleigh, and you're scared to play the football that is ultimately going to win you the game.
What many people have drawn that analogy with Neil. Normally, when you get a new job as a manager, you are taking over a team that is struggling. Yeah, foot of the table, near the foot of the table. It's not always it's rare to get a job when the team is already fulfilling, if you like, where it needs to be within reason. So Notts County were in the playoffs. They got a right tickle with Dover's record being expunged. That was a very good position to inherit. And I struggle sometimes that if you've come into something that's already working to an extent, Ian must have known that when he came in. And, I also believe the moment you are in charge, buck stops with you from day one, because, we know what the two scripts are going to be here. We get into the playoffs, we have a shot at going up. We miss the playoffs. It is highly likely that there would be a substantial churn, let's just leave it at that, of players this summer. Notts would then be talking, and the management and coaching team would be talking about a group of players that need to bed in, to mature, to develop under the new coach's system. There's no guarantee we will be better next season just because we're going to churn a load of players.
No, but and that's going to come down to recruitment.
For me, I don't think you can make a managerial change unless you think you are going to strengthen your chances of getting out of this league, right? As it stands, we have substantially weakened our chances of getting out of this league this season. Even if you're only looking at it statistically, we are now 9th. Yeah, we had a 4 or 5 point cushion. We had 3-4 games in hand. We were in a good position for the playoffs, and kind of everything we've touched in inverted commas over the past 4 or 5 weeks has kind of gone wrong. Starting with Hornchurch. And that, I think, is why fans are going to look very critically at this situation. They will say Ian is responsible if we don't make the playoffs. That, I think, is going to be the mood of a reasonable percentage of Notts fans, and I would have quite a bit of sympathy with that view. You know, if we get into the playoffs and we go up, people will hail rightly Ian Burchnall as the next Messiah, the man that took Notts County back into the Football League. Okay, and they should. And it's no good saying, well, Neil Ardley was in charge for 2/3 of the season, and Neil Burchnall was only here for 14 games, right? So really, it was Neil Ardley. No, Neil Ardley's tenure, Neil Ardley's responsibility ended on the day he left this club, and Ian Burchnall's responsibilities and judgment as to whether he will be a success or whether he won't be started from his first game against Hornchurch. No ifs, no buts.
It's tough to argue with. Yeah, and I wouldn't be able to argue against that, to be honest with you. And you're right in the sense that the performances haven't, the results certainly at least, haven't been up to the mark of late. Some people I've heard say to me, well, that was going to happen anyway. And I don't know whether you can say that, because you're talking prospectively. It would have happened even if Neil Ardley had stayed. I'm not sure you can say that, because
I agree with that. That's fair.
Because statistically they're now on a worse run of form. They lost 3 games in a row recently in the National League. It was the first time that they'd ever lost 3 games in a row in the National League. Actually, it was the first time they'd lost 3 games in a row since Harry Kewell was at the football club. 3 league games in a row. So it never happened under Neil Ardley. So for those who have said to me, well, this would have happened anyway, I don't know whether you can say that. What I would say is I feel in a way for Ian Burchnall in just the timing of it, because you're right. He took over at a time and the boat was rocked massively when, in my opinion, it didn't need to be rocked. Not at that point. I think if we'd have got to the end of the season and Notts haven't gone up, and they'd have then said, right, it's time to make a change, I think that would have been more acceptable in many people's eyes. The fact that they did it when they did it surprised me. I think it surprised a lot of people. And you're right when you say that he took over a football club that weren't in bad form. And so he wasn't taking over a toxic environment, Ian Burchnall. It would be very easy to take over, or much easier to take over a toxic environment. And where's the new manager bounce, I've heard people say. Well, that comes when you're taking over a toxic environment. And if you're taking over from a manager who's not very nice and the players don't really like and they've fallen out of love with him, you couldn't say that about Neil Ardley. Players loved him. So that was another battle that he then had to overcome. So I get what you're saying with the buck stops with Ian Burchnall from the moment he takes charge. But I do think there are mitigating factors in unfortunate timing of when the change happened, which have perhaps not helped matters and maybe not given him the springboard that he will have wanted. And then I think that you said the buck stops with him. Okay. I think the buck can also stop with the owners who made the decision and are ultimately in charge of all of the recruitment.
Okay. We will elaborate on that point in 10 seconds. A few more observations from fans. And this clearly is something that splits fans as well. It's an interesting debate. Paul Smith, the week without a Tuesday match clearly had a beneficial impact. How long will its impact be seen? Ian Burchnall, we get. I call him the gaffer. The spelling's slightly different.
Yeah. I noticed. I was like, hang on.
Yeah, absolutely. I told you everyone at the club watches this. I still think we will make the playoffs, but we will be bottom of the playoffs. Means we will not be at home in either game, assuming we get through the first game. Crowd advantage will be key. Kelsdyke, I don't understand these comments about bringing his own players in. He has no experience of this league and players, and all the recruitment will be done by Excel. I think he means spreadsheet. And here's the opposite view. We always try and be balanced. Hang on, my eyes ain't what they used to be, Charlie. Matt Ben Knotts, I think. You cannot judge new team on this season. Must be given his own summer. All I'd say is Sam Allardyce, which is a referral to when you were probably in shorts, and Sam inherited, albeit a very struggling team. They carried on struggling. Following season, he got it sorted in a most spectacular way and took them to the championship with record points, record wins. And he follows up by saying, didn't want Ardley out, but we'd been poor for a few weeks. Right, okay. So you've lobbed a bit of a hand grenade in there, Charlie, and in true investigative interviewing technique. You mentioned the owners there, other people responsible. What develop that point for us?
Well, they recruit by committee at Notts County. Like that's no secret. I mean, the owners have said that they rely on statistical analysis. It's been mentioned in interviews before as well that when it comes to recruitment, they doesn't always have to tick these boxes. There are some players that Neil Ardley signed that were his signings because they were his signings. But there were other players at that football club, and it's obvious who they are. Your Eli Sams, your Ruben Rodriguez, people like that. They were signed because they were signed through the football radar model, which is, and people have looked at it and gone, it's Moneyball, you know, the old Brad Pitt film and what they did in America and all that sort of stuff with baseball and statistical analysis and sort of that, I guess, yeah. But there's a great deal of statistical analysis that has gone into a lot of the recruitment. And the hope is that it is a kind of way to short circuit success and you know, gain an advantage that other football clubs simply don't have, based off of the fact that they have a successful business that uses that sort of statistical analysis. And what we're seeing is them put that into practice with Notts County. I say guinea pig because that's got like negative connotations to it, but I'm thinking along those sort of lines in the sense that they're putting their theories and theories that they have found to be successful in their business into practice in the real world of football. And there are a lot of people at Football Radar involved. I see them at the games at the moment. Obviously, we see Richard Montague a lot. I'd love to talk to Richard Montague at some point about his involvement and how it all works and the recruitment.
Did you ask for an interview with Richard through Nick Richardson, or how does it work?
Not yet. And that is, it's on my list to do. The reason why I wasn't at the training ground last week was because I was on a week's holiday, and it's on my list to do now that I'm back this week. I would very much like to. Go on.
And I'm sure that all the people listening and watching this show would find that interview very, very interesting. Because as you say, we glibly throw out phrases like Moneyball, Databall, whatever, because none of us quite know 100% what this model is. We know, and I speak to a lot of people in professional football, and it is a model that has worked extremely well for Brentford. But allied to all the data and everything else, and I know the guys at Brentford, you know, there are some very highly skilled professional football people involved in that umbrella collaborative approach. Barnsley have used a not dissimilar model, extremely similar, and the sentiments sound great. You know, that irrespective of the manager, you identify, you recruit, and then you bring in a head coach or a manager that is comfortable with this philosophy. However, here's the big however, you've got to get the right players in.
Yes. It all comes down to recruitment.
And this is the interesting point that we have seen recently with Sam and Rodriguez. They were two of the people that were, inverted commas, when asked, I'm not sure whether it was you that probably asked the question, that was the blunt response, they're not doing it in training. The olive branch is coming back out. But if you look at the players who have been used, to an extent, with the possible exception of Chickson, Ian has gone with a broadly similar group of experienced, proven players that Neil was employing.
Yeah. I think it's easier for Ian to be able to do that in a way than it was for Neil, because Ian wasn't at the helm when those players that he feels aren't performing well enough and haven't performed well enough throughout the season. I think many would agree. It's easier for him to leave them out than perhaps it was for Neil to, because Neil was the man at the helm when they were brought in. Whether or not they were Neil signings or not, Neil will have still had some sort of a say in the matter. And so, yeah, you're right when you say that. And it all comes down to recruitment. It all does. And it's talk to Stal, on these long journeys, and well, not so much nowadays because we have to travel separately and stuff like that. But when we do spend all this time in the car, we talk, learn from this, great vast knowledge that Stal has from all of his time in the game. And he often say, recruitment, it all comes down to recruitment at the end of the day, because go back to Kevin Nolan, who is a man that I have great admiration for and a guy that I think a lot of. He didn't become a bad manager. The recruitment went wrong that summer. And you can look at this season, I believe, and look back to the recruitment last summer, again, as to the reason why they are not challenging for automatic promotion this year. It's not because Neil Ardley's not a good manager. It's not because he wasn't a good enough manager. He is a good manager. And I used to watch him change things during a game, play 5 yards further forward or a formation change, things like that. More times than not, it changed the game for the positive for Notts. He could look at a game, read a game, see how he wanted to change things, and it always led to a positive improvement pretty much. So he wasn't a bad manager. I just felt like the recruitment was the big letdown last summer, and that is what has led to this season. That, and I don't think they were ever given any opportunity really to get any sort of momentum going, because they suffered from so many COVID postponements at key times during the season. So it's all going to come back to recruitment, and it will come down to recruitment this summer as to whether or not Ian Burchnall and Mo Ross will be a success as well, because they can only do so much with the players. They have to get good players in. And if the Football Radar model of Moneyball or whatever you want to call it can ultimately lead to good footballers coming through the football club, then brilliant. They and Ian Burchnall should be given a great deal of credit for it. But only time will tell on that.
Do you have any more insight than the rest of us in terms of how recruitment is going to operate this summer? When we got the young midfielder in from Crewe, I think he went on the record in an interview with you, and he kind of said, I was given a load of videos about the lad. I looked through them on Sunday, and we signed him. Now, is Ian and Morris part of this selection panel? Do they make recommendations? Does Richard Montague call the shots? Do the owner call the shots? Are there formulaic systems you can only sign between certain ages? Is Ian, as far as you're aware, happy to have players brought in on his behalf? I mean, do we have any insight into how this is going to work?
Honestly, to some of those questions, I don't know, which is why I would love to, talk to Richard Montague, and I will send a text to Nick tomorrow to see if he would chat to me about it, because I think it'd be really interesting to answer a lot of these questions. You're right in what you say. I think the way that the system operated for the Regan Griffiths signing is probably what's the expression? An exception and not the rule. On this occasion, where, it's like, I need a player who's going to help cover the loss of Michael Doyle. Right, okay. Well, it's tough at this stage of the season, because it's this stage of the season. All the good players are playing and involved, and the players that aren't and are available to go out on a short-term loan are players that are either young, like Regan is, that sort of thing, or bang out of form and favour. And so they would get, you're right, give them 4 options, which one do you want to choose? That type of thing. I think it's very much a cooperative. There will be some signings that will be suggested by Football Radar. Some of this is information that I'm putting together from different bits and bobs that I've heard over the last year or so. But some of it is, it's a suggestion from Football Radar, a suggestion from Neil Ardley, then Ian Burchnall and Mo Ross now. And if the two can measure up, and the suggestions from Ian Burchnall and the statistical analysis from Football Radar match, and they all tick the boxes. It's a marriage made in heaven, and off they go. And that will only help to expedite the signing. However, that won't always be the case. There will be some situations where the manager wants this player, but maybe it doesn't stack up with the statistical analysis, and vice versa. And on those occasions, I imagine that's when you have a debate and a discussion. And on some occasions, concessions are made. And I guess on other occasions, those concessions won't be made and the signing won't happen. So it is fascinating. And as I said, I'd love to chat to Richard Montague about it. So I will ask to see if we can chat to him. He says hello. He seems polite enough at the grounds and things like that. But I must admit, I've never had a conversation with him. So some of that is educated guesswork. Some of it is not even that. So I would like to chat to him and clarify on those details. You're right.
Some more observations. Alan Cotty hardly should have stayed until end of season at least. I think he would have kept results better, if not great. Agree that recruitment model isn't working. Joe Johnson, the squad is unbalanced. You cannot make a silk purse out of an unbalanced squad. Here's an interesting consequence of where we end up this season. ZO. Promotion or not, are we likely to still have any sort of youth academy next season? Only one player even gets a sniff of first team this year from academy, and no players in squad from previous graduates. It is widely reported, and the owners, I believe, did an interview, a Q&A session. One of the main takeaways was the academy's on very thin ice, because of loss of funding. And so when we're talking about a recruitment model, if you're not going to have an academy, let's not go into the debate of right or wrong at this moment in time, it is certainly going to take one avenue away from you to develop bright young talent that you get very cost efficiently, because you're bringing them up from your own academy. They probably live locally. You can get them on a commensurate wage for that stage of the career. When you're trying to bring 19-year-olds from other clubs, sometimes you have to pay a bit more money, all the rest of it. Any thoughts on that?
It's difficult, that, because you've got to remember there's great competition where we are. This isn't Devon and Torquay. There's Torquay, Exeter and Plymouth there, basically, and that's kind of your lot. And I'm not even sure Torquay have got an academy at the moment. At least they didn't when me and Mark Ellis were playing in that local area. Right. And whereas here, the best players are going to Leicester, Forest, Derby, maybe up into South Yorkshire, maybe into the West Midlands. So I think you're always then fighting for the scraps. You're trying to pick for scraps then. And maybe they're looking at it, and again, I don't know, but maybe they're looking at it and thinking, because of the financial situation at the moment, is it worthwhile for the amount of talent that we're producing that we're getting through into the first team? And when you look at the players, or the lack of players that have come through, of course, a couple have been sold. Remember Keon Atete, he went to Spurs. And there was the guy that went to Wolves as well. Yeah, are those very isolated, examples, and throw Sam Osborne in the mix as well, who came through and actually played for the first team. Are they enough to justify what I'm sure is a costly exercise? I don't know. Jack Burney, of course, Jack Burney went off to Liverpool as well. That's the thing; they're isolated. Good shout, Ben. These are few and far between. So is that enough to justify there being an academy? Crikey, I hope so. I hope there can be an academy, because there are still footballers that slip through the cracks. And if your academy and the scouting is good enough, then you may be able to pick up some of those players that slip through the cracks. We have seen that over the years. Players that got told they weren't good enough to play for Forest, who came to Notts and turned out to be more than good enough to have played for Forest. So it's a real debate, isn't it? It would be a lovely thing to have, but at the moment, is it a financial luxury that the club can't afford? I don't know. I wouldn't like to say, but I certainly would like to see an academy, and a thriving academy, going forwards, because I do believe you're right when you say it takes away an avenue of recruitment, and a cheap avenue at that, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. And it also is good for the local area. It's good for local kids. It's good for local PR, in the sense that the Notts County badge means something to young children, wanting to play professional football. So I hope they can have an academy. I hope it thrives. But at the moment, I can't speak for how difficult of a financial commitment that would be.
Yeah, I mean, one interesting from this whole approach of the owners, SB mentions it. Remember, European signings are not possible moving forward. So if you look where, with this approach, Notts went fishing in a pool last summer, clearly that net was being cast all over Europe. As it stands, and clearly Brexit and all the legislation is a bit of a movable feast, it would appear you can't go fishing in the European pool anymore. So this approach, instantly, that pool is now UK shores on the face of it.
Yes.
And you're then taking out the youth option. And I think historically, Notts has had a very successful youth system. Before you were in Nottingham, it churned many, many players out. There was an established pathway, and managers, clearly the Jimmy Cyril era, but Sam Allardyce as well, and Neil Warnock, put players in at 17 regularly. It's well documented. Johnson, Draper, Yates. Sam Allardyce brought in people like Craig Dudley, Matt Redmar. Not household names, but players who made a living in the game and came through at 17, 18. I'm not sure of the standard, and clearly we can't go and watch the games. But advocates of a youth system will say, winning's a mentality, and we've won one of the Midland Youth Leagues, and we're playing against professional clubs, Scunthorpe, that sort of thing. Is there not an opportunity to promote as a policy in the way that you are looking with Football Radar to target certain types of player in a collaborative approach with the manager? Is there a pathway for younger players to come through the system? They may or may not make it, but and I know, for a start, the bridge to get a player out of your youth system to get them into National League means the threshold of their standard doesn't need to be as high as when you're in League 2 or League 1 for a start, just at a very, very base level. And again, it would be interesting, wouldn't it? Your chat with Richard Montague, where do they see it? Is it purely a financial exercise? Because of the loss of funding, this becomes a financial exercise. We can't afford to do it. Or is it actually the modern era is such, when we've had good players, they get nicked? Well, Forest took one of our lads. It was kept under the radar. I better not use the word nicked. Nottingham Forest agreed a settlement figure with Notts to take one of Notts' very talented under 14, under 15-year-olds. He's already playing age group internationally, I'm told now he's at Forest. So clearly, Notts are identifying some half-decent players. And at a time, you see, personally, I think Notts are going to need every bit of good PR next summer if they do not make the playoffs. Because if we don't want to talk negatively, because, as you know, I bang the drum to get in the playoffs. If we don't, if you have these things like withdrawing the academy, having not made the playoffs, big churn of players, that isn't engaging your fan base. And that ultimately will be taken out on the manager and his coaching staff with regards to results. And if you're halfway come October, the owners will need the skin of a rhinoceros, okay? Because rightly or wrongly, that's the way football goes. And if we only need to have looked in the past 2 weeks to see the power of supporters and how even the most experienced of owners can misjudge and misread and underestimate the influence that supporters can make. People like John Henry, the Glazers, They are monumentally successful people. There's a reason they're worth billions, right? They are some of the most successful, ruthless, efficient businessmen on the planet. Add Kroenke to that as well, bar none. You don't think they've been assessing this European Super League?
For years.
We'll get a bit of flack. Yeah. Well, but in terms of how we sell it, how we pitch it, yeah, we'll get a bit of flack, but don't worry, it'll be all right. We'll drive it through. Lasted 48 hours when they went public. Lasted 48 hours. And I worry for the club at the minute if we do not make the playoffs. That's why I think it is so massively important we get into the playoffs. Because if we don't, I think it sets in motion a chain of events that may be very, very difficult to stop the ultimate outcome. No matter how much you say, Ian's on a 4-year contract, we see this as a long-term project, it will go out of the window. It will go out of the window if you do not hit the ground running in September.
And I say this as I'm going to have to put my 2-year-old to bed in a moment. But what I think you can't underestimate as well is it's like a starving man seeing food for the first time in a long time, how it will make fans feel when they're back inside the stadium again. And all of the pent up energy that will be within them, I think for a game or two will manifest itself in sheer joy.
Absolutely.
But then that'll fade pretty quickly. And then all of those months of sheer frustration and anger that they also sat through watching on a stream or listening to Stal and I drone on, that will then spill out if results aren't what the club need them to be. So I do agree that fan power is everything, and it shows what we can do when we're united. Imagine what we could do if we put that sort of unity to some of society's other big issues. You mentioned the social media blackout that will be in place to tackle abuse that keeps on going on social media. Imagine if, as a footballing community, we were as united in tackling that as we were in tackling the Super League over the last week or so. So the force, the power of fan power can't be underestimated, and difficult to disagree with you in what you say, because football is a game of huge momentum. And when you've got momentum with you, it's so difficult to stop. You'll hate me for mentioning this, but in my first season with Mansfield Town, they won 20 of their last 23 games. Prior to that, they were bang average mid-table, and they won 20 of the last 23 under Coxey and got promoted. The reason why Notts got relegated out of the Football League was because momentum was against them. It works both ways. And that's why it's so important that, yes, it's a long-term project, but there has to be some sort of short-termism view involved as well, because it's so important to stop the slide and start to generate some positive momentum, because otherwise that negative momentum can get away from you.
We'll let you go. Just we said Eastleigh. Let's have a very, very quick preview. What do you make of tomorrow? You're making the long journey down there. You'll be leaving at lunchtime, won't you? They clearly, you've just mentioned the word momentum. They're going to have plenty of it tomorrow, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. If I have a quick look at the notes book here, they played 2 games more than Notts, but they've lost only 1 of their last 5. And they've won back-to-back games, beating Notts and Sutton, which is obviously, no small thing, particularly beating Sutton at the moment. That's a heck of a result for them. They're big, they're physical, they played us recently, they know how to get at Notts, and they will do the exact same thing as what they did at Meadow Lane. They'll put lots of balls into the Notts penalty area, and Notts will have to defend them better than what they have done of late.
Charlie, thank you very, very much indeed for taking the time. It's been really
Absolute
good. We'll look to get you back on again soon. Forthright, engaging, loads of questions and observations. I'm not sure whether this is right, but both of us are going to be educated by Mr. Neil H.O., who says you can sign foreign players, but Notts won't, because it would take 6 if loaned out, or 12 months to possibly obtain a work permit. Manchester City have recently signed a Brazilian to go through that route. Well, there we go. We'll have a look at that. I'm sure the owners know the ins and outs of that.
I would like to think so.
On to more pressing matters. Eastleigh tomorrow. So we pay our money. We will be able to hear you tomorrow, will we?
Well, no, it's an instant stream.
For those who want to hear your commentary,
we'll be there. Yeah, you can find
Radio
it.
Nottingham. Yeah,
Radio Nottingham, BBC Sport website, BBC Sounds app. Stal and I will be there droning on as much as we ever have done.
Hey, we look forward to it. Charlie, thanks again.